That's great.
It's a
What?
like so I've got you should come you need to come by so you can see the setup. So I've got like a whole little I'm my it's my home office, my recording studio, like the whole bit all in one, but I've got everything all plugged in together. So
Nice.
but anyway, so before we start the interview, so what's on your mind as far as D&D is concerned? So think about somebody because our target audience is somebody new to either is vaguely familiar with D&D, has maybe just started playing or thinking about playing. So it's um, as well as experienced players, but primarily someone that is not necessarily um, that much experience with D&D. So
Sure.
what
Sure.
can you bring as an experienced player DM to them is something that I would love to talk about. So think about
Sure.
that. Um,
Okay. I have it. I have at least. Well, I have a couple of answers actually. Um, First, and I didn't say the funny part yet, Andrew. You okay?
oh
Choose life, my
God,
friend.
yeah, swallowed my coffee wrong.
That's never good. It's never good.
Wow. Anyway,
I totally feel for you right now. It's funny. I always find myself now especially
hmm
in a place where I want the new players.
right.
I want the people who are like hesitant or like, well, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I'm good at that. I don't know if I don't know if I can do the role playing. I don't know if I can do like, or I can only do the role playing. I don't know all the math or this, that. Like there are a lot of things that people have said to me over the years of starting D&D and just kind of understanding like what it's all about. And recently I had the absolute pleasure of teaching my daughter how to play. Now
Oh,
she's
that'll be something good we can talk about.
yeah, because she's 20.
hmm
She's a writer. Amongst other things, she's a incredible writer. So my impetus for that was, hey, I should really introduce her to this because this is how I start creating stories with people. And it's as simple as that. It's like, do you want to tell stories? Do you have a story you want to tell? Do you have something? Could you be part of a story? Like I think that's always my big thing in that. And it's like I yeah.
This is Fizban.
Fizbad. Oh, nice.
Oh, you're so whiny. You're so whiny. He's had a busy day with our other cat, so. But anyway, so yeah, so playing with your daughter.
Yeah. So, funny enough, I got her the player's handbook.
Hang on, let's not get too deep into this. Let's save this for the actual interview. So
Yeah.
let's but that's a perfect topic. So I think
Sure.
let's maybe talk about maybe dispelling some of the myths that people coming into D&D might have, and how do we welcome new players to the game and help navigate maybe some of the questions they have and the um always trying something new. Everybody's a little bit nervous, so maybe we talk
Sure.
about how to break through that nervousness and that unease and how to get into the game, since you've
Yeah.
got
How to find that how to find that comfort spot, if you will.
yeah. I think
It's
it's a
like
great idea.
yeah, and I you know I I don't know that So I have a game coming up on Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
and one of my players is my friend Joe's wife. So she hasn't. I don't think she's. I don't believe she's played before. But it was like, hey, you know what? Bring Nicole, right? Oh
Mm-hmm.
well, Nicole hasn't played before or whatever. And like he's just starting playing, and I'm like, yeah,
Right.
but why not? You do stuff together. Like you both have like your place in your own nerddom and geekdom and what have you. You know, you love video games together. There's so many things you share together. This can just this can just add to it, right? And his objection when he came into playing was the fact that he's like, dude, if I get into this, I'll go deep because I get into stuff and like I know it's something I could like. I'm afraid of it because of my my
Right.
potential
I feel
involvement.
that. I feel that based on how much D&D themed stuff I have purchased.
Yeah,
I get that.
I I feel like
I mean, we now have a cat named for a D&D character, so
it's just amazing. I love it so much. I can't even tell you. Like I know that for a long time, and like I was telling you, like I texted you, like how I started and everything,
right.
but how I came back to it. You know, there wasn't any hesitation because somebody approached me and they said, "Wait a minute, you play Dungeons and Dragons?" I'm like, I survived the Satanic Panic. I came through all of that, and I was a new player then.
Right.
And they're like, well, what was that? You know, and people ask me what it was like. And I'm like, look, I have two really awesome parents that all they want to do is talk about it. And they're like, we know all your friends. You're down in the basement. It's totally cool. And that was, you know, my dad was my first DM, you know, like that kind of thing. So they were talking to other kids' parents, like reassuring them, like, they're not down in the sewers summoning demons and alligators, like,
Right.
you know, that kind of thing. And so I think that's a thing that's within that.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are fears within the game. Like people go, oh well, you're doing this, or you like. I, I'm part of a group, a singles group, right? And I discovered some of the guys played. I'm like, these guys have to have played. And two of the guys totally played, and they were like experienced players. They're like, would you guys want to play Dungeons and Dragons? They're like, oh my gosh, yes, right. But then there were three other
Uh-huh.
people that were like new, that were really new to it, and they're like, we would love to play. We would love to learn how to play. It's something I've always wanted to do. And one of the people, Judith, she's a new player, right? She's now been playing for 2 years, and she started, and her daughter actually helped her roll up the character and everything.
That's awesome.
So, and it was a thing where she even said, she says, I thought it was really cool because my daughter helped me out and she helped me understand a bunch of things. And she plays and she, you know, she does her own thing, but I tell her what we're doing and this is what I'd like to do. And it's always, I think probably one of the most important questions to kind of get somebody started is, what do you want to do? You know, what story do you want to tell as part of this larger world? You know, who's your character? Who are you?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes it's a, you know, I have a guy who plays, you know, he started playing and he's definitely a video game player
Right.
because it's very much a, I got to clear the whole level. I, and, and it's very much like I talk to the more experienced players and I'm like, okay, you know, give me the feedback. How do you think this is going? They're like, oh, I think it's going great, but clearly so and so is definitely a video game player because he's trying to clear the whole level, and we're just
Well,
trying to
that
get out alive. So
I'll tell you a story later about that. But let's do this. Let's start. Let's do an official start to this interview because I want to introduce you and we can dive into all of these fun, fantastic uh, topics.
sure,
So joining the podcast today or whenever this episode airs is a good friend of mine, James Bergold, and we go way back
we do. Yeah,
to many years to previous careers
yeah,
and I am going to refer to James as the beginner's DM. So based on our conversations, he is a fantastic DM, and he is very welcoming to new and beginning players. So I think he's a great great guest to talk about those kind of coming to the game new, those who really don't even know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, and maybe wondering, is this something for me? Can I really play? Do I have to live in my parents' basement to play this game, or what have you? So we're going to answer a lot of those questions, dispel some of those myths about D&D players, and go from there. But James, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I appreciate it, and I have to right off the bat. I have to give you credit for something, and I don't know
Oh,
if you know this, but I want to tell you about it because Andrew, you are the inspiration for one of the characters in my campaign. Specifically,
uh-oh.
you told me about your character, and that I made kind of surrounding that. I made a Tabaxi in your honor that is in my campaign that mystified my players to no end for the longest
Nice.
time. So I wanted you to know about that. I also wanted to give you proper credit. I will always give you credit for that character that I created because it's been a lot of fun. Um,
That's great.
you know, to kind of, I mean, she's an NPC, but at the same time, they didn't know what to make of her at first. And that was kind of fun. It's like, who is this
Uh-huh.
Tabaxi? Like, what is going on with her? So that's just fun. And
That's great.
you helped me with that. So I'm forever grateful for you because that's just been a blast playing that character. So
Thank you. So for those who are listening who may not know what race a tabaxi is, it is a feline race within Dungeons and Dragons. I originally created a blind tabaxi monk named Draufganger, which is German for daredevil, because I fashioned the character after the comic book hero Matt Murdock, Daredevil. So that was my inspiration for that character, and I loved it. It was such a fun character. I literally still have the little minifigure on my
nice.
desk right in front of me here, from that character, because it's probably one of my absolute favorites that I have played over the years. So thank you. That's really nice of you to say.
Yeah,
They're fun. They're fun characters to play.
they really are. And I mean, that's one of the things I think when we talk to, you're right. I love beginning players, and I've had nothing but good experiences with a lot of first time players. And funny enough, uh, my own brother and my daughter are two of them. And on two different occasions, I got to play. Like, it was Christmas time, and my nephew had asked me all about Dungeons and Dragons. He's like, "Uncle James, you've DM'd for a long time, and like, can you tell me how I can get out of this because my character got mind controlled or something like that?" Like, he was all sorts of excited. He was like,
uh,
Mom told me you play Dungeons and Dragons," and he just thought it was the coolest thing. So I'm like the cool uncle, right? You gotta
that's
love that.
awesome.
But playing with my brother, because my brother was little when I was playing, when I first played in high school. So he was always
Right.
curious about it. But we never played. And I always thought it was funny. And, you know, he's a guitar player and he wanted to play a musician. He wanted to play a bard. So that
Oh,
I think
that's
is
perfect.
yeah, it's a big thing. He loved it because then he learned about vicious mockery, which is a spell for bards.
Ooh,
For you guys listening, and it's just like literally insulting. And it's perfect for him, really.
insults that really truly inflict.
Yes.
They say sticks and stones, but
Right. Yeah.
but vicious
Vicious
mockery
mockery
will
will kill
definitely
you.
hurt as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's
So,
great.
it's really, I think the really fun thing when you have a new player is like people are hesitant. Like you and I have talked about this. Like what
Hmm.
are their, what are their hesitations for starting to play and everything? And a lot of times people are like, wow, there's so much stuff and there's so, yeah. I say there's a pencil, a piece of paper, and maybe some dice. But dice can become an addiction. Just be warned. That's.
I suffer from that issue.
I do. I'm a raging dice goblin if ever there was one. And yeah, there's
Yeah,
there's way yeah, too many dice to count. So
I know we're going to a Comic-Con this weekend, and I've got to behave myself. I've already scoped out the vendor list, and I
yeah,
see the dice vendors, and I'm like, oh,
oh, that's gonna be a problem. Yeah,
that's right, that's right,
I could have some real difficulties. Yeah,
absolutely.
I better run past these guys.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
yeah, and that's um,
But it really, we've talked about this on the podcast before. How simple it really is to get into the like. There's you can certainly overcomplicate it, but it really is a very simple and easy kind of game to get into. There's a low barrier of entry, at least cost wise, but it's kind of figure it out as you go along. I mean, there's
sure, absolutely.
that's why it's great starting out as a level 1 character, because you don't, if you're a spellcaster, you don't have a ton of spells to
Yep,
remember. You don't have a lot of features or things. So as your character levels up throughout the game, you gain that experience as well. So I think it's really ideal for somebody who wants to get into it, kind of not really knowing what's going on, and especially if you have a great DM like yourself to help guide them down that path.
yeah. It's. I think it's. I was thinking about this when you asked me the question of like what's a good thing for new players to learn. I'm like, bring your imagination.
Hmm.
It's the simplest, most truthful thing I could probably say is like, do you like stories? Do you want to tell a story? You want to help tell a story? Because I always look at it
You
as,
want to be part of the story, you know.
yeah, you want to what part of the story can you be? And
Hmm.
it's fun to see, like you're saying, when you start out as first level player, like all my players, they started out as first level in this group I have, and three of the players were brand new players. And it was only that I was talking to the two more experienced players, and they're like, "Oh, we would love to learn how to play. Oh, I've always wanted to play that." Right? And whatever barrier was there, either they didn't have people to play with,
Right.
or what have you. That like it's easy. Like, oh, absolutely, you can play. Everybody can play. If you don't want to play, you can watch. How about you watch? If you don't want to play, if you're not ready to, okay. How about this? How about like I've approached it in many ways, and I've let people that haven't played. I've even offered them like, hey, how about this? How about you be the how about you be the voice of a character that's already in the story? You just want to try it out. You want to try it out for an evening, and then we see if you want a character. Like
Hmm.
if there's really a hesitation, that's what I think I always turn to is maybe you can lend your voice to the story at first. Like
Right.
just and all you have to do, I tell you who they are, and you put whatever spin on it, and that becomes the part of the story. And
That's an interesting way to kind of ease yourself into the game. Basically being
yeah,
an NPC and
you get a guest star role.
interacting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like I continuously offer, and I think I hope I've said this to you as well, but like I offer everybody like, look, you want a guest star? You want to play for a night? You don't have the time for the camp? Come in and be a guest star one night. I'll let you be a villain. I'll let you be here, like whatever you want. I can put you in that story, and that's one of the great things about this game is it is simple when you think about it, but it
Right.
can encompass such complexity because you can get a pre-made world or you can build your own. You know, and I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh, for sure.
you know, I I think um, people have asked me like, well, could you do a story on this? And it could be anything. So in fact, I am working on a campaign, like a series of one shots
Hmm.
based on the Golden Girls.
I think that's so give us some insight into what that looks like.
Okay.
What have you worked on so far?
Okay. So somebody had told me like the basic premise for the latest version of Dungeons and Dragons. They thought of what is the basic party, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a fighter, a magic user, a thief, and a cleric or healer, right?
Right.
So you have to have those four making up an ideal group. You can pretty much do anything with those four classes together. So they said basically that Dungeons and Dragons 5e party is based on the Golden Girls. And each of the Golden Girls represents one of those classes. So you have Dorothy, who's B. Arthur, and she's the fighter.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
Okay. You have Betty White, she's the cleric, she's the healer, she's the holier one, right? You have Rue
Yes.
McClanahan, who plays the Southern
Blanche.
Blanche, thank you. And
Such a
she plays,
Blanche.
and it goes back and forth between she's either a bard or she's a rogue. One of the she could be either one, right?
Right. Can she
And
multi-class as a bard slash rogue?
it could easily be she could fit into either of those classes, right? She could.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then you have Sophia, who's the magic user. She's the wizard. And I thought that I never knew that, and I thought that was hilarious,
Very interesting.
right? So I have to use that as a premise. What if you took it one step further and you built their world? So
Well,
I
you told me about this a little bit before, so
yeah,
I can't wait to hear it again. So please tell me about this.
okay. So um, the whole idea was to use and I had looked up something, I forget what it was, but it was a retirement village, and I think it was actually the Villages in Florida, because somebody
Okay.
told me about that. My ex mother in law was living in the Villages, and I saw a map, and I remembered seeing the map, and I looked it up again. I'm like, I already have a map. I have a D&D map, and it's based on the Villages.
That's
It's
amazing.
the Villages, right? So you got source material already. You know you have at least four characters, right?
Right.
And I thought, well, what do I do? What do I do if I need like a a villain, or what do I need? What do I do if I need an extra player, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I found myself watching, you know, whenever I got the chance, I'd watch a Golden Girls episode, and I used Dorothy's ex-husband, Herb, as a villain or something. I have that set up for an encounter with Herb, and it's like what based on, and literally take some of the plot lines and make an adventure out of it.
You
And it
you could you could have somebody that's after them for their money and
Yep, absolutely. Or
for sure.
yep,
There's so many ways you could go with that.
so many ways. And I was down in Atlanta, and I walked into this meadery down in Atlanta. And what are they doing? They're playing Dungeons and Dragons inside this place and it's the owner that's
Uh-huh.
running the game. And I'm like, oh my god, I think I found my people. Like, what's going on here? You guys are playing Dungeons? Like, this is awesome. And I told them about the Golden Girls, and they started rattling off names, and I have a whole list of names of other retirement villages and homes. And my thought was, okay, they can adventure, and they can go from village to village and adventure along the way and run into things like killer geese. What it doesn't, you know, what does it matter? It's an encounter with something. Does it have to be high fantasy? No, it doesn't. Can it be modern day? Absolutely. Or any combination thereof. Like, that's the beautiful part, is that you're literally creating the scene, and it can be as simple as one adventure. Hey, I have some time. You guys play D&D. Can I learn how to play? You would never get a no from my table.
Oh yeah,
Ever.
we there are it doesn't have to be your traditional kind of medieval kind of dungeon crawl. We did a one shot with Joe, our other host, and it was a Christmas themed one shot when I think we all had candy cane themed weapons. One was like one shot like hot chocolate. They were there. It was like a whole random thing, and I think it was Krampus that we were like trying to defeat. He was the big bad of that one shot. But it was hysterical. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be your traditional uh, world for Dungeons and Dragons. You know, there's the framework that they have built out can really be laid over any type of environment with any type of character. So
yeah,
I think that can definitely make it much more welcoming to others um, who are not necessarily comfortable with that with that typical D&D environment that you would think of.
yeah. I mean, it's funny that one shot is I created a side adventure as well that was a Christmas themed thing, but I kind of
Hmm.
they're like, oh, it's coming close to Christmas, and we don't have a lot of time or whatever. But I set up this whole side adventure, and they started going down that path. But best laid plans don't ever they don't always go as planned, right?
Well,
And
I always say the job of the party is to thwart the DM's plans.
it happens every time. It happens
Oh
every
yeah,
time. And you know what? The most fun you have, you can't be as a DM. I will tell you, like you got to go with that. You got to go with that because
absolutely.
gosh, it can be so much fun. Because it's like, okay, I my nephew came to me and he said, will you play with us? Like, will you play? And I'm like, absolutely, 100%. And there was something in every room. And then he didn't believe me. Like he said, oh, well, Uncle James, you DM'd a lot. Like. And he would tell his brother and my brother, he's like, Uncle James is
Hmm.
going to kill us because he's the DM and he's going to look to destroy us. And the funny thing is, that is far from what I am as a DM. Like, it can it happen? Yeah, but what's the fun if it's not me against you? It's us telling a
Right.
story, right? And he searched an empty room, but he insisted he was convinced that there was something in the room. And while he was, and I had him roll the search, and he rolled a nat one.
Uh-huh.
So basically, the premise became he hit his head and went unconscious. He didn't know this, but he kept on searching the room, and I basically turned the room into a giant blender, and he was making a pina colada. Like stuff's kept on falling into the room, and at the
That's
end,
fantastic.
he's like, but my character's gonna die, and I'm like, is your character gonna die? Well, he could drown if I don't get out of it. And he managed to get out of it, and he goes, what do I see? And I'm like, you see the bunk that you hit your head on and knocked yourself unconscious. And he stepped back and he goes, Uncle James, I'm gonna need a minute.
That's
Because it was
fantastic.
this thing and it was like build it, but it was out of the ordinary. It was
Right.
not anything planned. You turn a room into a giant blender and make a daiquiri. Like uh, silly stuff happens, and I think that's something that it's something to know, but it's also something to embrace because what's the worst? What's the worst that can happen? You're letting everybody have fun. You're making a safe, fun place for people just to express themselves and just have fun. Right.
I think that's what people who have anyone who has not played D&D or has not seen just kind of a regular game of D&D being played need to understand that it really is just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It can get silly at times.
Uh,
It can get very very tense. You know, if you're in a battle and your forces are dwindling, but it's always a tremendous amount of fun, and I always come out of the back end of a D&D session always just enjoying myself, and there's always so many stories that you have to tell with your party, you know, as time goes on. And it really is just a a lot of fun. It just
oh, absolutely. I mean, if that's the,
yeah.
if you tell me if I tell you the common things that I find is that, first of all, you make a table full of friends. you're having a blast. You're having fun, and it can be nonsensical. It can be serious. It can be really dramatic. It can be terrifying. It's all of those things. It's like, well, what kind of movies do you like? What kind of like I ask players like, what part of the story do you want to be? What is your story? And not everybody has the answer right away. And I don't think you have to have it right away, especially if you're starting at first level. You like one of the great things I heard even recently is like, well, what's your character's job? And the knee jerk reaction is to say, oh, well, I'm a thief, or yeah, but what do they do? What did they do before they became a thief?
Mm-hmm.
Like, were they a farmer? Were they just a peasant, or whether they, fallen royalty or royalty, whatever? Like, what was their job? And I thought that was a really interesting approach because it's like you could be anything, you could have a background, you can make any character you wish. And I was asked recently, I started playing with a group that I hadn't played with because of COVID and everything, and we after 2 years we started playing just recently.
Right.
And one of the premises was they were they were feeding me information about their characters because I let them start at a higher level.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only because I played with them before, but I wanted them to have some more options in this campaign and whatnot. So the short answer was because of she said she had tattoos or markings on her arm that she couldn't explain. This is like a gift. When players give you those things, when they give you those little pieces of backstory that and each one of them gave me something that fit almost perfectly into the campaign. And that's the thing you look for. If that can happen, oh my gosh, it's like candy. It's just delicious. And you get great ideas. Like if you think, oh well, I'm a new player, and maybe I don't know what to do. I'm like, that's okay. What do you think you should do? What do you think you want to do? I think those are important questions to know. Like, hey, is this possible? Like, can I step back and ask you a question? Sure, absolutely. Yes, I won't. I won't. I won't automatically assume that you're asking me that in the game because you're learning how to play.
Right.
Right. And I think that having that environment and saying, "Is this possible?" And I've seen some really creative solutions. And I've seen dumb things happen. I remember an early dungeon that I was early on in playing. I played a dungeon with friends, and
Mm-hmm.
and the guy who was the magic user decided to throw a fireball, but he wasn't paying attention to the details, and it turns out the dungeon was made of ice, and we all died because he drowned us all. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like I'm a wizard. I want to throw my fireball. That kind of thing.
I made a similar mistake. I was talking about this with somebody earlier today. We were trapped in a library. It was a multi-level building. We were on this floor. It was a library, and there was a trap door that was locked that we could not open. There was some trick to
It's always the door.
opening it, and we couldn't get it open. But we were being attacked in this library, and I my rash kind of quick reaction was there was a bunch of enemies, and I'm like, I cast fireball, and the DM said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" I said, "Yes, I want to take out as many of these enemies as possible." So I cast fireball, and resulted in lighting half of the library on fire because it's full of books and wood shelves,
Yeah.
and
Oh my god.
and quickly the room is filling with smoke
You
as
have
we're
a room
as
full of
we're trapped.
fuel.
So there are consequences to your actions,
Yeah.
even in D&D,
Yeah.
for sure.
Oh, oh, absolutely. And you know what? Not for anything. How much fun did you have?
I had a blast because then all of a sudden it's like, oh my god, we have to get out of here,
Yeah.
and now you're trying to figure out how to get out of there. But
But
I think you were talking about something really interesting, and I think it's a great point is developing the backstory of your character, and this is where um I think it gets to be a lot of fun. So as you're, you get to make up the story of who this person is.
Yeah,
It's not, it has nothing to do with who you are as a person. You can write it as anything. You can, again, you could be a commoner who married a prince and now you're royalty, or you could be, I was in one of our adventures, I played a Haragon, the rabbit race.
yeah,
But what it was the background was he was actually originally the rabbit of a magician in a traveling circus, and he was the rabbit that was always getting pulled out of the hat, and suddenly a bolt of magical lightning hit the magician, and the magician and the rabbit changed places. So he was the rabbit ended up becoming a sorcerer, so he had all the magic powers that the magician had,
yeah.
and now the magician was a tiny little human. So they changed places, and now the rabbit was out adventuring and running away from the magician who was trying to get his powers back.
That's
So
awesome.
the rabbit was on the run, and he joined up with this party and was always on the run in fear of being caught by the magician. So that was the backstory I wrote for one character. So it could be it could literally be anything. It's
It
like
can,
you said,
yeah,
you're only limited by your imagination.
yeah, and I think that's it. I don't think that so I played with this group, and when my friend Drea found out I played Dungeons and Dragons, she's like, "Oh my gosh, you have to play with us. I will be the DM." I'm like, "No, I could DM if you want." Like that. She goes, "No, I would love to DM and see what you come up with, what kind of lunacy."
Ah.
And it's and truthfully, I hung back and I said, "Look, I want everybody to have a good time, and I know I'm the most experienced player you have at your table, but I want everybody to have fun. I want them to let them go first. I could figure it out. I can be the tank. I can take all the damage. I can take like I don't have to do anything weird or exciting or anything, because
Right.
I am having a blast playing with you guys again, and I'm all about that, right? And and it was fun. But then you know,
Mm-hmm.
slowly I've been giving them my backstory for this character as we level up, and I don't. I think some people can hesitate to say, "Oh, I got to come up with a story and how many pages, and I'm got to write something." And like for some people, it could be a stopper, right? And you don't want there to be any. You don't want there to be any stoppers, right? So I say it's okay. Like, hey, look, I'm the DM. You just tell me what the story is, even if you write it a line at a time. Even if but it. I think it becomes a positive thing if you're writing that backstory with the DM
Mm-hmm.
who can give you, like for all my players, what I did was I said, okay, what do you want to do? And I have somebody who wanted to be a shapeshifter. I'm like, great. And their good friend happens to be a werewolf. The player is well, I'm sorry. One is a changeling and
Mm-hmm.
one is a shifter. One is a werewolf.
Right.
And but they know each other. And he was in a different form. They walk in the bar, and I'm like, and the werewolf player comes in, and I'm like, yeah, you know who this is because you smell him, right? And just automatically, like I'm thinking dog, greater nose receptors, the whole thing, like
Makes
I've
sense.
played it off that way. It's like you automatically know this is Joe,
Right.
and that's a lot of fun because it's like those reveals after a while they can be a lot of fun because you go, okay, over however many sessions, you go like, okay, I slowly wrote my backstory because I'm learning how to play, and I think that's perfect. Because then as you reveal it, like I had a player that I told him, he said, like, I'd like to be part of a secret order that protects people. I'm like, perfect, I have one of those. I'm like, you're a part of this.
You just so happen to have one of
I
those.
just so but I did, and that's the funny thing. Like my players have gifted me incredibly. Like I come up with these ideas, and I'm like, yeah, maybe this will make it. Maybe then, like I have list
Right.
upon list in my phone of all of this, giving myself source material out of nowhere, and I just start writing and whatnot, right? And so he's like, he said this. He goes, I'm kind of a protector, and I said, okay, you are now a member of the Silver Talon, and it's a secret society of protectors that doesn't have boundaries. They don't have borders. They protect people in power, so they can't be kidnapped or somebody can't imitate them or what have you. Like all of this stuff, right?
Hmm.
So here are the players, and now he's a first time player, and here are the players, and they come into this room. They go under the city and they're hiding because somebody's after them, and they come into this room and he automatically recognizes the symbol. I said, what is your, give me a perception roll. And he rolls high. And I'm like, yeah, you realize that at the table, you see on their hands, you see a ring, and it's usually a ring, a brooch, or a dagger or the hilt of a sword or whatever that has this
Hmm.
marking on it, right?
Right.
And it can look a little different, but they recognize it immediately. And so what does he do? But very smoothly, he takes his sword, he puts it on the table, and he says, "I live to serve." And the rest of the players go, "What?" It's this shocking moment, and they're like, "You're the newbie! Like, what is going on?"
That's
And he
great.
just got the greatest. Like you could see, he was just beaming because he's just like, "I know who these guys are, and they're on my side," kind of thing, right? And they're like, "What the hell just happened? What happened?" Right? And that's a fun thing that you can do. Even part of your backstory is like the little secret that you share with the DM. That's delicious.
Oh yeah.
It's like you have this little thing, and I gave each of them that opportunity. Like, what do you want this to be? What do where is this come from? Why is this way? And it can change. It can change throughout the game. It doesn't have to be a static thing. And I think that's another wonderful thing is that there's nothing set in stone. The rule of cool always applies, and that just makes it so much fun for everybody. It's like, oh, I got this now. You know what? I realize I can do this. And they would send me stuff, and I'm like, okay, this is where you come from then, because this is the place you come from. This is what's around you, and try to give them geography and
Right.
backstory to different things that, I'm like, how do you think that fits in and everything, and it becomes collaborative storytelling, and that's why this game is so amazing, and just to start out, gosh, I'd love to be a newbie again. That's why I love people who want to learn. It's like I remember how fun that was, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So so what do you what do you say to the person that comes up to you and says, "Hey, I'm interested in playing
Yeah.
D&D, I know nothing about it. What's your elevator pitch to get them into the game, and how do you what are the so how do you get them into the game, and let's say what are the three key pieces of information somebody should have getting into walking into it. So we said there's very little barrier to entry. There's
Right.
very little setup to it. So, but what are the so how do you get somebody into the game, and then what do you say, like what do you say here? These are, if you had to give maybe advice, or say this is really the key things you need to know to play, and then just let them loose.
I I really enjoy. I think I get the most. I think it's satisfying, but I get the most reaction
Hmm.
when I ask people. I like to ask questions instead of saying, "Hey, you should do this. This is it." I like to ask them
Okay.
questions. who's your favorite? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite book? Right? What's your favorite
Mm-hmm.
TV show? Like, I want to know those favorite things because I don't want to know the person, but at the same time, like literally, one of my favorite questions is, what was your favorite toy when you were growing up?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, because it tells you something about the person. Like what? Because I love the fact that when people start talking about that, their eyes light up and they get genuinely excited.
So I will tell you my it wasn't a specific favorite toy.
Yeah.
I was a big GI Joe
Oh,
fan,
nice, nice.
and it was so funny. So my brother and I, so I mean I was probably more pro Cobra, 'cause I always loved the bad guys because they always had the
Yeah,
cooler toys.
yeah,
They had like the cooler weapons and stuff. But this was back in the days of like when like camcorders first came out,
yeah.
and my brother and I were in the basement, and we were like making movies with
Nice.
our GI
Oh, I love
Joe
it. I love it.
characters, and it was I love, so that's like my first experience in telling stories and kind of role playing the
Yeah,
different characters. But I was obsessed with GI Joe and the figures and the vehicles and the GI Joe base. Like
yeah.
I had
Oh
like
my
the whole
gosh.
thing. It was crazy.
Oh my
So
gosh. Yeah,
I was like obsessed, and so that's like I loved watching the cartoon show. So I love that whole concept, and so that's my favorite toy as a kid
that's
growing up.
awesome. I love it. I love
I loved it.
it.
Absolutely
I
obsessed.
I used to live up in Rhode Island, and when you go into a
Hmm.
Toys R Us in Rhode Island's the home of Hasbro. And I
Is it
remember
really?
yeah, I was going to college up in Rhode Island.
Hmm.
I spent a year. I was going to go to Rhode Island School of Design. I decided not to, but I was up there, and it was my brother's birthday coming up, and I love GI Joe. Oh my gosh! But he was of the age of really playing with it, and I was in college,
Right.
and I couldn't resist. And for his birthday, I went hog wild. And they had moved from Rhode Island to New Jersey, and
Right.
I came in and I had boxes and everything wrapped up for him, and I got him like all these figures and
Oh man.
the big black plane and everything, and I'm just like,
Oh, I
oh my
remember
gosh,
that.
this is like,
Yeah.
I think I got him the aircraft carrier for Christmas, like, but here's the thing,
Uh-huh.
what nobody will tell you is it was probably the place to go was Rhode Island because Hasbro subsidized all the Toys R Us and it was so cheap to get GI Joes at the time. It was That's
Oh
why I
man,
got so much for
I
him
wish
because I'm
I'd
like,
known that.
I'm a college student on a budget, and I got to buy my little brother all this GI Joe stuff, and I'm like, this is awesome. Like this is all the
That's
stuff that I
great.
would want. But yeah, love. I love that answer. I love the GI Joes. But
I'd love a GI Joe themed D&D adventure. That would be like,
and that's the beautiful thing about it is
you could do
you
it.
can do it.
Yeah.
You can make Snake Eyes and you can make Storm Shadow and the whole, like
Mhm.
you can make every character. It's entirely possible. Um, and remind me sometime because I will share with you pictures. I don't know. A friend of mine does GI Joe cosplay.
Are you talking about Keith?
Yes. Oh, you know Keith. That's right.
I know
Yeah,
Keith.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah. Keith has done some.
love it. I love his
Yeah,
cosplay. He's
I
amazing.
love it. I love it. I think I showed somebody like I showed him the GI Joe and I showed him
Uh-huh.
the Tintin that he did.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, like he's just into it. And he sews and everything. He does the whole 9 yards.
It's
So
impressive.
yeah, it's amazing. So but yeah, it's like what's the thing you wanna do? What's the adventure you wanna have? Like what is it? It doesn't have to be medieval high fantasy, you know.
No,
It's
not at all.
look, I think about I was up at the Renaissance Festival one time and this whole club
Mhm.
of Star Trek fans, and they were a club, and there was another club, and they met them up there, and they were a Klingon club, And what they did was they pretended that they were in Star Trek and they got caught in the holodeck, and they had their whole adventure. Like they spent the day at the Renaissance Festival in Star Trek costumes at the Renaissance Festival.
That's amazing.
Right?
That sounds that's like straight out of Next Generation.
Yeah,
Like for
absolutely,
sure.
absolutely. But it's what is it? What is that? That's pretend, right?
Like again, you're only limited by your imagination.
Exactly. And
That's
yeah,
absolutely the truth.
I get that. That's Star Trek at the Renaissance Festival isn't it. Believe it or not, it's related. It's related in the way that you're pretending, you have your imagination, and it is a wide open landscape because you can. It's as simple as a pencil and paper. It's as complex as a fully realized world with political intrigue
Mm-hmm.
and like when I started building my homebrew campaign, I wanted it to be approachable by anybody, but I put in some different things that my players don't know about. And I won't say here during the interview. I will
No
tell you.
spoilers. No
Yeah, I don't
spoilers.
want any spoilers because I've told them all they should listen to you. Like I told them all they should subscribe to your podcast. And
Thank you.
yeah, and so they hear this, they're like, "What's coming?" like, but no spoilers, no spoilers.
That's right.
But just some of the premises that I've encountered over the years. Like, I had newbie players go into a dungeon and they ran into a dragon. Like, I let them go the way, and they found this thing. There is no way that the whole party would have been dead,
Mm-hmm.
right? But they knew they had been in a fight. They had tripped a few traps and everything, and they came upon a dragon. But instead of fighting
Oh
the
boy.
dragon, they talked to the
Mm-hmm.
dragon, and they played chess with the dragon instead of fighting him.
It has flashbacks of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey playing Battleship with the Grim
Yes.
Reaper.
Oh, yes. Nice. Yes. 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 So
You sank my battleship.
yeah, I came up with roles and I said, here's how you do. But they're like, how,
That's
and
amazing.
they expected, because he was like this old dragon, they're like, so how long does it take him to beat me? And they just all assumed that they could not beat the dragon in chess. So they didn't play actual chess. I came up with a series of roles of how they did, like performance roles, basically, and the dragon had advantage,
Right.
and because it was his lair, and he invited them, and basically, and in the end, he was so enamored with the Cardius, and rolled charisma checks and everything else like that. In the end, he's like, "Here, I'll let you take something from my hoard because you came and you kept me company, and you talked to me, and you amused me, and we played chess, and you made me very happy. So you may each have." And I granted them one. I gave them a choice of like a few items, and they
Right.
each took an item, and it was a magical item, and it wasn't anything game changing or anything, but it was just having that. Like, I played chess with a dragon, and I won a sword. Like, how cool is that? You know. So
I see. I'm very similar sometimes because it's sometimes I try to find creative ways of solving a problem instead of being the murder hobo and just
yeah,
going in with my sword and attacking or whatever weapon I have. And I can't remember if I've talked about this before, but there was in our most recent campaign, I had the invisibility spell,
mm.
and we went into the courtyard of this castle, and suddenly about 25 enemies came out because we were making so much noise. They came out and to see what was going on, and there was two separate groups. There was a group of kobolds and there was a group of cultists, human cultists. And what I did was I turned invisible. I ran into the center of the group of cultists and shouted something. I shouted insults at the kobolds, and so I think I had to roll persuasion. I had to roll some sort of ability check. Fortunately, I rolled high enough. So the kobolds thought that the cultists were insulting them. So the kobolds
Nice.
attacked the cultists, and we as a party then ran in the opposite direction
Nice.
and
That's
and and, and
beautiful.
avoided having to fight like 25 different
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Um, so it's again it's just the creativity. It doesn't always have to be what what's expected,
Yeah.
you know. And I've talked a lot about that in character creation. You don't have to, and Joe has talked about that as well. You don't have to do what is necessarily expected of a race, of a class, etc. You don't have to follow exactly what's in the rules.
No, you don't. No, I mean not at all. But I think one of the things that I can't stress enough for even, I have a player that played a lot of video games, and we talked about this, and
Yes.
he very much, oh, I want to finish the level.
Right.
I got to hit every room. I'm like, well, did you draw a map? Like that kind of thing. Yes, I reveal a map, and it's funny because I'll ask them, and
Uh-huh.
they're like, what? You don't have the map? I'm like, did you keep a map? Like, I'm just saying. You're like, but wait a minute. Usually you give us the map. And I'm like, this is theater of the mind, my friend. Yes, there are times that I give you maps and times I don't. And like,
You gotta pull the Hansel and Gretel and throw some
yeah,
breadcrumbs.
exactly, exactly. And it's funny because they get confounded. They're like, what do we like? I
That's great.
you know I love making a setting that might appeal to one of my players. Like I love to
Hmm.
include that. And I love to focus on the newest player because I want them to have agency and I want them to be included. I want them to feel included right off the bat because I've already asked the question, like, what do you want this adventure to be? And I did that. And one of my players, her background was her she was a new player, and her family, she was a halfling, and she and she's a sorcerer.
Hmm.
So she has dragon blood within her line, right? And that's how she comes about with her powers of sorcery.
Interesting. Okay.
So but her job was, her family were tea merchants. Okay. So her her story has been building, and she has a tea set with her,
Hmm.
and she would
Okay.
make tea. And so this setting that I created was essentially a Japanese meditation garden and a tea house with rice paper walls and everything. But to gain access, she needed the help of another player who was a monk to do all the meditations. She knew some of them, but he knew all of them. And so he taught the other players, like, I do this. We did it through skill checks and everything, performance checks and whatnot. And
Right.
so they had to go along this like, little meditation route in this beautiful garden to get into the tea house. But because she knew tea, that gave her historical advantage in different places. So she'd ask if she knew about something. Well, she's going into this tea house. Now, what they faced in the tea house was there were there were cultists who were invisible, and there was a person visiting this tea house who was the magister of a city. Only she figured it out. She
All
figured
right.
out that
Uh-huh.
this person was actually a changeling, a doppelganger, disguised, and they were practicing in order to gain entrance into the city and overthrow the city.
Oh wow.
Right.
Well, that's clever.
So she said, like, do I know her? I said, the ancient tea ceremonies of her people, right? Because that was her historical reference point, right?
Hmm. Right.
Because her family traded in tea. And I said, she comes from the city of Aranthus, and she's the magister of Aranthus. But something's a little off. She goes, and she came up with it. She's like, is she wearing her necklace that she would wear? I'm like, no, she's not. and then they attacked because
I love
there
it.
were things
I love it.
that were out of place.
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden the cultists start attacking and become visible. But then there's extra added layers. It's like, okay, I have a pretty powerful party, so I have to challenge them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking at, out and out. If the roll happens and they die, okay, that happens, but it's not me out trying to torture them or kill them or anything else like that. And there were some serious skill checks. So they're searching and they're going, and I had one player decided to stay in the tea house because he was the one that meditated and showed. He was a Harangan. He was the rabbit folk,
Okay.
and he's a rabbit folk
Excellent.
monk, and he knew, this was keyed for the both of them, and really I created it so they would have time to interact with each other and everybody else.
Right.
And the tea house, the actual outer walls of the tea house, were giant mimics.
Oh my God.
They were giant horde mimics. So they are the side of a building. Like each of them was one side of the building.
Yikes. That's quite an enemy to
Yeah, yeah.
encounter.
But here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I placed those mimics on the outside of the building to look exactly like the building, right? But I did it, and I had it so that they would follow the meditation route, because I knew some players might go, "Oh, let's just cut our way into this beautiful tea room."
Right.
So they came out of the tea room after the fight, and he goes, and one of the players was like, "I just cut through the wall to get back into the tea room and search the place." I'm like, "Oh, you do? Okay.
Ha,
Roll
ha,
to hit
ha,
the
ha,
building."
ha.
Well, he wasn't rolling to hit the building. He was rolling to hit the mimic that was disguised as the building.
Right.
And then the fight ensued because now they hit this thing's huge. And then in doing it, they woke up the other one. So if they didn't attack it, if they left it alone, they would never have encountered it.
Right.
But if they got lazy and they tried to cut their way into this building, then it was on, right?
Do you give them the big roll for initiative?
All the time. Yeah. Roll for initiative, you know. And then I'll roll stuff, and there are things that I roll along the way, and I go and I set the parameters for myself.
Right.
I don't really. It's funny. I have this one D20 that I've played with them, and it rolls terribly. It should be in a dice jail forever at this point. But sometimes
I've
that's a
got a
die
few of
that I
those.
have, and I just pick up whatever die, like is it for, and I roll it, and I don't want them to see my rolls on D&D Beyond, because I use D&D Beyond. I've used Roll20 in that, and
Right.
yes, I know I can make that roll to myself, but I love dice, so I always have the die in front of me, and that just helps me visually and everything. It's like, okay,
Yep.
so yeah, I will absolutely say roll for initiative, and I will say if they're like, I want them to, the the critical role, phrase of how do you want to do this?
Uh-huh.
It's a beautiful thing. It's literally a beautiful phrase, because the excitement that it generates once you start using it is palpable. Like it's like
Oh
they're
yeah.
like, oh my gosh. And that is actually, when somebody gets a critical hit, when they roll a
Mm-hmm.
nat 20, and I want them to describe it. And I find that
Absolutely.
people, that to me is a way of getting people into role playing that might not role play.
Mm-hmm.
Just describe it for me. What does it look like? Like and somebody will go like, I have my battle axe and I cleave its head in two, or what. And it could be the simplest, straightforward thing. And sometimes they pick up on that and they just eat it up like candy. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah. So,
Oh
my
yeah.
final blow is a spinning death kick, and like, whatever it might, whatever it might entail.
Yeah. It wasn't the final blow, but I was playing a Dampier, a half vampire, and this happened just recently. We were fighting a dragon, and um they have I think it's called vampiric bite. I can't remember what the what the ability is, but you can fanged bite,
Okay.
and you can sink your fangs into something, and not only does it inflict damage, but when you roll the damage die, you get back that
Oh,
same
yes,
amount
yes, yes.
of
Like a life
points
drain.
as hit
Yes.
points. And so I'm like, I jump on the neck of the dragon and sink my teeth into it, and like drain it of its life force. And I think I had to like roll an athletics check to actually like climb onto the back of the dragon, and
Nice.
I had to like roll like I think two different ability checks to actually get on the back of the
Yep.
dragon first before I could even do that. It was just it's just so much fun. And then one of our other party members was able to kill the dragon, and they um one of their things, they always like cutting off the heads of the enemies. They keep the heads of the enemies as trophies, and so they were trying to cut off the head of the dragon, and I'm like, hang on, I'm still on its neck. I'm like, I'm like, don't hit me. So I'm trying to get out of the way of them slicing off the head of the dragon, and it was just they had a roll to avoid hitting me as part of the activity. But it was so much fun. It's great when you can describe when you get the
Yep.
opportunity to describe all that and really get
Yeah.
into the
And
action.
I,
It's a lot of fun.
and I think even the simplest of descriptions, I think is sort of the gateway or the key to more role playing, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and when people are having fun doing that, and I don't discourage if somebody's not ready for role playing. There's no forcing anybody into it. That just makes it not fun,
Hmm.
and I
Right.
like the idea of describing things as the simplest of role playing. And it's funny, you said they like cutting off the heads of things that have trophies and stuff. So I have a magic item for you, if that's okay.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I love magic
I
items.
came up with a magic item, and it's based on a bag of holding. Okay. It
Hmm.
is the bag of assembly.
The bag of
Yeah.
assembly. Okay.
And what the bag of assembly does is when you have players that want to keep trophies, you throw in a bag of assembly instead of a bag of holding. It looks just like a bag of holding, can act just like a bag of holding. But one
All
of the
right.
players, it's actually a partially cursed item. And what it
Okay. So
really
do tell.
it's a trophy bag, right? And
Mhm.
you can just like list it as like this is a trophy bag. So it's a bag of holding, but just for trophies for monsters and stuff like that.
Right.
Well, the player is compelled by the bag to collect a specific type of trophy. Could be an arm, could be a hand, could be a head, could be a wing, could be a leg, foot, toes, whatever pieces, right?
Mhm.
And as the thing goes, what they're actually doing is they're actually assembling a monster.
I had a feeling that's where
Yeah.
this was going.
So they are like they go like you are compelled like the trophy on this monster is you want
Mhm.
that arm. It's kind of like Rocket Raccoon always wanting appendages for people, right? In Guardians.
Right. Right. Right.
And that served as part of the inspiration for this. But I'm like, okay, well, what if there was like a basically almost like a mimic bag, but the mimic needed more parts, but the bag is actually the brain of the creature itself,
Interesting.
and once it has an
Okay.
entire body, so you just keep on track of what they have in the bag, and the minute they
Right.
assemble anything, like, oh, if there's a better item, the bag goes, ooh, that's a better. I want that. I want that head, or I want that leg, or that. And once you get to a place where it's and guess what? The bag levels up just like they do. So the bag gets harder and harder to beat
Oh my.
because it's constantly collecting things. And you just and basically I set it up to roll like, does the bag attack? right? And it becomes like a random encounter. Like, does the bag feel complete? Like I keep a list of
Right.
what they're carrying in the bag.
Mm-hmm.
And once they get to a full body, I'm like, is the bag greedy? Do they know they're going after? Like, the bag can hear what they're doing, that kind of thing. So it's a very,
Just wait for a long rest
yep,
when they're all asleep.
exactly. Did you get your long rest? No, I'm sorry, you don't have your spells back. Now you got to fight the bag of assembly.
That's right.
And
That's great.
yeah, it's a vicious item, but it's a fun item because like people that, I have a player in one of my games who is a chaos gremlin. And
Mm-hmm.
like one of those would be ideal for him because he came to me, we started playing again, and he came to me and he said, "Look, I got an idea for a character." I'm like, "Okay." And I thought he was pulling it right out of Deadpool. He goes, "No, I'm just this guy named Peter. I'm going to be a bard, but I'm just going to be a guy who plays guitar on the weekends for his friends." And he's not very good. He goes, "He's good at talking to people, but every time he plays, you kind of feel like you've been robbed. Like you didn't really get the performance
Mm-hmm.
like that he was leading up to."
Right.
And he's like describing the guy in Deadpool 2 that's just like the guy that shows up.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I said, "Look, I'm going to do you one better. I'll let you play that character." And this is before we've even played, one session. I'm like, "I'll let you play the character, but you have to do this. You can be Peter. You can play him any way you want, but I'm going to destroy your character. I'm going to kill him. Because in order to be Peter, you have to have made a pact with a demon, elemental, whatever. It doesn't matter. Pact with whatever." I said, "You've made a pact with a fae, and they basically took out an insurance policy out on you. So you have to die in a very public way. But the greatest thing is, if somebody collects your ashes, you get reconstituted every day. But you get blown apart. You just die in some very public, awful way, so that the fae can collect the insurance policy on you." And
Uh-huh.
so the players meet him, and they know he's a chaos gremlin. They know he is all about the chaos. And they're
Right.
like, "What are you doing?" They're like, don't be this character. Don't." And then basically they were all walking together, and I said, "And a giant fireball hits you from above." And the rest of the party, I'm like, "It does no damage to you. Actually, you feel pretty invigorated." And I gave them like a blessing instead of blowing them apart with a
Right.
fireball.
Ah,
But it incinerated Peter Markey, the character.
right.
And then like you just see a pillar
That's
of
great.
ash, and he just crumbles to the ground. Right. And now there's investigation and stuff like that. The town constable, like everything, and they're like, "We're out of here." Right. So they're going to run into that character again and again because it's just going to be a running bit because
It's
this
amazing.
player,
I love that.
he loves a good bit, and he'll play to the bit like no, like he
That's
commits to the
amazing.
bit, you know, and it's just fun. But I mean, that's, the length and breadth. And I make fun of the fact that, you have first time players that are hesitant to like choose their class or race or what have you. And then you have an experienced player who's full of chaos, who wants to play a loaf of bread that has become self aware. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. It's ridiculous to the nth degree. But somehow you let everybody have their fun.
That's what it comes down
Yeah.
to. So so yes, let's everybody absolutely should have their fun.
Yeah.
So let's do this. We're running out of time. So what would be your so what are some parting words to the new people in let's say you're assembling a new table of new players. What are your opening words of wisdom to this new group?
What makes it fun for you? Right there. What's the story we want to tell together?
Mm-hmm.
What makes it fun for you? Um, I don't necessarily, unless somebody comes to me and says, I want to play a bad guy. I don't, I kind of discourage that right away.
Right.
Um, but I do give players the opportunity to play the other side of things, like subconsciously or unconsciously. Like all of a sudden they
Hmm.
figure out they're not the good guys, that kind of
Right.
thing. So it's kind of like, and the lesson of that is the words to give of that is like lean into what you're playing and have fun with it. Like really, really let yourself have fun. Let yourself play, you know. And I go to this. I'm like, I said this to somebody one time when I was teaching them, and I said, okay, and they wanted homework, right? So what's the homework I would give my players? I would say this thing: it's okay to play, and it's play what you want. Play the hero. You know, play the person you see in the movies that's in your favorite movie or the favorite hero in the book. Like, is your life like is your character like theirs? Is that how you want them to be? Is that what you want? Like, hey, I want to be a fighter and be like Optimus Prime meets Yoda meets Captain Kirk meets Han Solo. Like,
Why
why
not?
not? Okay, let's incorporate something.
Absolutely.
What are the things of those, like, you know, do you have to come to a table with an idea? No, that's what the table's all about. It's all about kind of coming together. And does everybody have to know your story? No. Do you have to have the whole story? No, but hopefully along the way you're writing that story. So it's kind of like be open to your imagination.
I love that. Be open to your imagination. It really is. It's a your character in the game is really just a blank sheet of paper waiting for you to tell your own story. So,
Absolutely.
James, thank you so much for your time. I
Yep.
really appreciate it. I love this chat. Always good talking with
My
you.
absolute pleasure.
Um,
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that's all we got for now. So I'm gonna yeah, let me stop all these recordings. Stop that. I got so many things recording. Let's see if I can stop this.